My name is Marcus Holloway. I am 72 years old, and for 50 of those years I built a world of comfort and security for my family. I thought I had given them everything. Last summer at our family lake house, my grandson Leo, my only grandchild, pushed me into the deep cold water and filmed me as I was drowning. He laughed and told me not to be so dramatic. He had no idea that this old engineer was about to design his masterpiece, the complete and total demolition of the future he thought he was entitled to. Before I continue my story, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and be sure to hit like and subscribe if you believe that respect is earned, not inherited. The July air by Lake Michigan has a special kind of stillness, the kind of quiet I had worked my entire life to afford. At my age, I didn't ask for much, just a comfortable fishing chair, a gentle breeze, and the peace of knowing my family was taken care of. But that peace was a fragile illusion about to be shattered. "Grandpa," Leo's voice cut through my thoughts. My 17-year-old grandson stood behind me, his lanky frame blocking the afternoon sun. "What is it, son?" I asked, my eyes still fixed on the red and white bobber dancing on the water's surface. "It's just about the university fund," he said, a strange hesitation in his voice. "I just wanted to make sure everything was still, good to go. $500,000 is a lot of money." A dry chuckle escaped my lips. "It'll be there when you need it. But you have to earn it first, Leo. Trust isn't a handout." I made the mistake of turning to look at him. In that brief moment, I didn't see the boy I had taught to ride a bike. I saw a coldness in his eyes, a calculation I had never noticed before, a chilling sense of appraisal. "Oh, I get it," he said, and then he moved. Without any warning, his hand slammed into my chest. The shove was so sudden, so brutally efficient, that I had no time to brace myself. The fishing chair tipped backward, the sky and the water flipped upside down, and then the piercing cold of the lake swallowed me whole. The initial shock stole my breath. Water rushed into my mouth, my nose a suffocating invasion. I flailed my old legs, kicking wildly in the dark, deep water. My clothes, my heavy work boots, instantly became anchors, pulling me down into the abyss. A familiar sharp pain began to blossom in my chest. My heart, the traitor that had already failed me twice in my life, was screaming in protest. It was a language of pain I knew all too well. I fought my way to the surface, gasping, coughing up water, desperate for a single precious lungful of air. My eyes searched the shoreline, praying to see panic on my grandson's face. But there was none. Leo just stood there, motionless, a smirk playing on his lips. He slowly pulled his phone from his pocket. The sun glinted off of the screen as he raised it, aiming the lens directly at my struggling form. I heard the faint click as he started recording. "Come on, Grandpa," he said, his voice casual, almost bored, as if he were watching a dull movie. "Don't be so dramatic, it's just a joke." His laughter echoed across the quiet water. It was a sound colder than the current trying to pull me under. And in that moment, I understood everything with a terrible clarity. This wasn't a prank gone wrong. This was an act of pure intention. My grandson, my own flesh and blood, was standing there documenting my potential death. The pain in my chest was no longer just physical. It was the pain of a betrayal so profound, so absolute, it felt like a shard of glass twisting in my soul. It was sharper and deeper than any physical ailment I had ever endured. I had faced down racist contractors, cutthroat business rivals, and economic recessions, but nothing had ever prepared me for the casual cruelty in the eyes of the boy I loved. Back in the house, I allowed them to wrap me in a thick wool blanket and sit me down in my favorite armchair by the fireplace. They moved around me with a practiced, hollow concern. Nia brought me a cup of hot tea, her hands steady, her eyes betraying nothing but a daughter's dutiful care. Kevin patted my shoulder again, telling me to rest, assuring me they would handle everything. Leo had vanished to his room, probably on his mother's instruction to stay out of sight. They thought their performance was flawless. They didn't realize I was watching them through a new lens, every gesture, every word analyzed and filed away. They thought I was weak, a frail old man shaken by a near-death experience. But the cold water had done the opposite. It had been a baptism, washing away the fog of sentimentality that had clouded my judgment for years. The engineer in me was now fully awake. While they saw a victim, I was methodically laying the groundwork for my countermove. I feigned exhaustion, closing my eyes and letting my breathing become slow and even. "I think I need to sleep," I mumbled, allowing a tremor of vulnerability into my voice. That was their cue to leave me alone. As soon as I heard the soft click of my bedroom door, I was moving. There was no weakness in my steps. The pain in my chest had subsided, replaced by a cold, burning purpose. My office was my sanctuary, a place of order and logic. On the wall among my degrees and building schematics was a framed photo of my late wife Imani. Her smile was a constant source of strength, and now a source of profound guilt. She had never trusted Kevin. "He looks at you, Marcus," she had once said, "but he doesn't see a father-in-law. He sees a bank vault." I had dismissed her concerns as overprotectiveness. How I wished I had listened. But regret was a luxury I couldn't afford. I sat down at my large oak desk and turned on my computer. For years, I had been almost obsessive about security, a habit from my days overseeing massive construction projects where one mistake could cost millions. I had a state-of-the-art surveillance system installed on the property with high-definition cameras covering every angle, including the lakeside dock. Naya and Kevin had called it paranoia. I called it good engineering. I typed in my password and accessed the system's archives. Finding the correct timeline was easy. I selected the camera with the clearest view of the dock and hit play. My own hands were steady as I watched the scene unfold on the screen. There it was in crystal-clear resolution, me sitting in my chair, Leo approaching, the brief tense conversation, and then the push. It was unmistakable. Not a stumble, not a playful shove. It was a deliberate two-handed thrust, delivered with intent. The video captured the cold, impassive look on his face, a look that was completely absent from the tearful performance he had given me just minutes earlier. I rewound the footage, my jaw tight. I needed more. I switched the camera angle to the one mounted on the side of the house overlooking the patio, and my blood ran cold. Standing near the glass doors, partially obscured by a large potted fern, was Kevin. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't talking to Nia. He was watching the dock, watching the entire event unfold. He made no move to intervene. He just watched. And after Leo pushed me, I saw him give a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval before he turned away and pretended to be surprised. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I saved the footage to a secure encrypted hard drive, making multiple copies. This was my primary evidence, the irrefutable truth that would dismantle their lies. They thought it was their word against a confused old man's. They had no idea they were up against a man who documented everything. As I sat there in the silence of my office, the only sound was the low hum of the computer. The image of Imani's smiling face seemed to look down on me. I felt a surge of resolve. I had failed to protect her legacy by letting these vipers into our family. But I would not fail now. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about restoring order. This was about justice. The engineer was about to go to work. The digital evidence was my foundation, the concrete and steel upon which I would build my case. But I knew it wasn't enough. The video showed what they did, but it didn't show why. To truly dismantle Kevin's operation, I needed to follow the money. His home office, a place I had always considered a fortress of financial security, was now my next target. But I couldn't just walk in and demand to see my files. That would show my hand too early. I needed a reason, a Trojan horse, to get me past the gates. The plan formed in my mind with the clean, simple lines of a well-drawn blueprint. The accident at the lake was not just their crime. It was now my opportunity. I waited until the next morning, giving them a full night to believe they had gotten away with it, to let their guard down. I called Nia, making sure to put a slight wavering weakness into my voice. "Honey," I started. "I was on the phone with my insurance agent this morning about the incident yesterday." I heard her sigh on the other end of the line, a sound of pure annoyance. "Dad, can't this wait? We're a little busy." "It can't," I said firmly, but then softened my tone again. "They need a list of any pre-existing conditions, doctor's visits, things like that. Apparently it affects the claim. All of my important files are in the big cabinet in Kevin's office. You know, the one he set up for me. Could I possibly stop by and get them?" There was a moment of silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, weighing the inconvenience against the potential financial payout from the insurance. Greed as always won. "Fine, Dad," she said. "Come over around 11. Kevin will be here." When I arrived, Kevin greeted me at the door with a smile that was all teeth. "Marcus, good to see you on your feet. How are you feeling?" "Like I was pulled out of a lake yesterday," I said, my voice flat. I let my age show, leaning heavily on my cane as I walked into the house. I had never used a cane before in my life. I'd bought it that morning at a drugstore. It was the perfect prop. He led me to his office, a room filled with mahogany furniture and the smell of expensive leather. It was designed to project an image of wealth and stability. My wealth, my stability. "The files are right over there," he said, pointing to a large filing cabinet. "Let me know if you need any help." "Actually, I said, sinking heavily into a chair. "Would you mind getting me a glass of water? My throat is a bit dry." It was a simple request to test. "Of course," he said, his perfect host persona kicking in. "Be right back." The moment he left the room, I moved. There was no frailty now. I didn't go to the filing cabinet. My target was his desk. It was clean, almost sterile, but I knew that people like Kevin always had a weakness, and his weakness was arrogance. Pushed to the side of his desk, partially covered by a leather-bound planner, was a thin manila folder. It wasn't labeled with a client's name. It just had the initials K and L written in Kevin's sharp, angular handwriting. K for Kevin, and L, I was now certain, for Leo. My hands were surprisingly steady as I opened the folder. It wasn't full of official documents. It was his personal ledger, pages of handwritten notes, stock tickers, and account numbers. And then I saw it. A series of wire transfer confirmations. Large sums, tens of thousands of dollars at a time, moving from my meticulously managed retirement fund into an account for K&L Future Holdings. The final piece wasn't just a transfer, it was a loan application against my portfolio for $500,000, the exact amount of Leo's university fund. The application was still pending. My near drowning wasn't just about expediting an inheritance. It was about creating a medical crisis that would give him the power of attorney he needed to push that loan through. I heard his footsteps approaching. I didn't have time to read more. I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying across the screen as I snapped clear, high-resolution photos of every single page. I closed the folder, slid it back exactly where I found it, and sank back into the chair, my heart pounding just as Kevin walked back in with my glass of water. "Here you go, Marcus," he said, smiling. I took a slow sip, looking at him over the rim of the glass. He saw an old man, frail and defeated. He had no idea he was looking at his judge, his jury, and the man who was about to become his executioner. "Thank you, Kevin," I said, my voice perfectly even. "You're a good son." The accusation was so absurd, so completely disconnected from reality that for a moment I thought the lack of oxygen had made me mishear her. She was blaming me. I had been pushed. I had nearly drowned, and she was worried that her son, the one who pushed me, was the one who was scared. The betrayal was a physical blow more painful than the icy water or the ache in my chest. For 40 years, I had been her hero, her protector, the man she ran to when she was hurt. Now in her eyes, I was just a clumsy old man, an inconvenience who had frightened her precious child. Kevin, ever the smooth operator, stepped in to play the peacemaker. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt heavy and false. "Hey, let's all just take a breath," he said, his voice calm and reasonable. "He's just a kid, Marcus. You know how boys are. It was a stupid prank that went wrong. The important thing is you're okay." "A stupid prank," I wanted to scream. "He pushed me. He watched me drown." But I held my tongue. I looked from my daughter's accusing face to my son-in-law's placating smile, and I saw the trap. They had already written the narrative. I was the dramatic old man overreacting. Leo was the innocent boy who made a mistake. Anything I said would be twisted, used against me, painted as confusion or senility. The absurdity of it was suffocating. They stood over my soaked, shivering body, not as family, but as a committee deciding my fate, and they had already voted against me. My mind. The engineer's mind saw it for what it was, a carefully constructed facade designed to manage and neutralize me. Their words were not meant to comfort, they were meant to control. They were telling me what my reality should be, and in their version, I was the one at fault. I was the problem they needed to solve. And as I looked at them, a terrifying thought began to form. A thought so cold and sharp it cut through the pain and the shock. This wasn't just a cover-up. This felt rehearsed. He helped me to my feet, his arm around my shoulders. He was talking to Nia, calming her down, reassuring Leo that everything was fine. He was the picture of the concerned son-in-law, a pillar of support in a moment of family crisis. But then as he turned his head slightly to check on Leo, he thought I was looking away down at the wet grass, still catching my breath. I wasn't. My eyes were open and they were sharp. I saw it clearly, a quick, subtle wink. A fleeting gesture that lasted less than a second, but it was a silent, damning message that confirmed everything. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a prank gone wrong. It was a plan. And Kevin, my trusted son-in-law, the man I had entrusted with my finances and my daughter's happiness, was in on it. In that moment, a cold, hard clarity settled over me. The shock, the fear, the pain, it all receded, replaced by a quiet, calculating rage. They thought I was a frail old man, easily confused, easily manipulated. They thought they could get away with this. They had made a grave miscalculation. They had forgotten that I was an engineer. I spent my life designing systems, analyzing stress points, and identifying weaknesses. And I had just found the critical flaw in the foundation of my own family. I allowed Kevin to lead me back to the house, playing the part of the shaken but forgiving patriarch. I let Nia fuss over me with a dry towel. I listened to Leo's stuttered, insincere apologies. I nodded. I said it was okay. I told them I understood. I lied. Because as I sat there, wrapped in a blanket, I wasn't recovering. I was planning. They had pushed me into the water, expecting me to sink. But they were about to find out they hadn't pushed an old man. They had pushed a stone, and I was about to drag them all down to the bottom with me. Back in the house, I allowed them to wrap me in a thick wool blanket and sit me down in my favorite armchair by the fireplace. They moved around me with a practiced, hollow concern. Nia brought me a cup of hot tea, her hands steady, her eyes betraying nothing but a daughter's dutiful care. Kevin patted my shoulder again, telling me to rest, assuring me they would handle everything. They thought their performance was flawless. They didn't realize I was watching them through a new lens, every gesture, every word analyzed and filed away. They thought I was weak, a frail old man shaken by a near-death experience. But the cold water had done the opposite. It had been a baptism washing away the fog of sentimentality that had clouded my judgment for years. The engineer in me was now fully awake. While they saw a victim, I was methodically laying the groundwork for my countermove. I feigned exhaustion, closing my eyes and letting my breathing become slow and even. "I think I need to sleep," I mumbled, allowing a tremor of vulnerability into my voice. That was their cue to leave me alone. As soon as I heard the soft click of my bedroom door, I knew the real work could begin. There was no weakness in my steps as I rose. The pain in my chest had subsided, replaced by a cold, burning purpose. They saw a victim heading for his bed. What they didn't see was a predator heading for his den. Back in the house, they fussed over me, their concern as thin and transparent as a layer of ice on a puddle. They wrapped me in a blanket and sat me in my armchair, moving around with a hollow energy that felt rehearsed. Nia brought tea. Kevin offered empty reassurances. They saw what they wanted to see. A frail old man, shaken and vulnerable. A problem that could be managed with a little bit of warmth and a few comforting lies. I let them see it. I leaned into the role, my movements slow, my voice soft and weak. But beneath the blanket, my mind was on fire. The shock of the cold water had faded, replaced by the ice-cold clarity of purpose. Every word they spoke, every gesture they made was no longer just a part of our family dynamic. It was data. I was no longer a father or a grandfather. I was an engineer observing a critical system failure, tracing the cracks back to their source. My weakness was a disguise, a strategic retreat to a position of observation. I feigned exhaustion, my eyes closed, my breathing slow. I think I just need to rest," I murmured. It was the perfect line. It offered them an easy solution and gave me exactly what I needed: solitude. The moment I heard my bedroom door click shut, the performance was over. My mind was already in my office with my security system ready to find the truth they thought they had drowned in the lake. My office was my sanctuary, a place of order and logic where the chaotic world outside could be reduced to numbers, angles, and schematics. I moved towards it not with the shuffle of a weary old man, but with the steady, measured pace of an engineer approaching a complex problem. On the wall, among my degrees and faded blueprints, hung a framed photo of my late wife, Imani. Her smile, usually a source of comfort, now felt like a gentle accusation. She had never trusted Kevin. "He looks at you, Marcus," she had once said, her voice laced with a certainty I had foolishly dismissed. "But he doesn't see a father-in-law. He sees a bank vault." That I had told her she was being overprotective, that she didn't understand the pressures of modern finance. How I wished I had listened to her intuition, to the wisdom that saw past the polished surface to the rot underneath. But regret was a luxury I couldn't afford. Guilt was fuel now. I sat down at my large oak desk, the familiar weight of the leather chair a small comfort. The low hum of the computer was the only sound as it came to life. For years I had been almost obsessive about security, a habit from my days overseeing massive construction projects where one mistake, one miscalculation could bring a whole structure down. I had a state-of-the-art surveillance system installed on the property with high-definition cameras covering every angle from the front gate to the lakeside dock. Naya and Kevin had called it paranoia. I called it good engineering. A system, whether it's built of steel or of trust, is only as strong as its weakest point. I was about to find the precise point of fracture. I typed in my password and accessed the system's encrypted archives. Finding the correct timeline was easy. I selected the camera with the clearest view of the dock camera 4 and hit play. My own hands were steady as a surgeon's as I watched the scene from just an hour ago unfold on the high-resolution monitor. There it was in crystal-clear detail. Me sitting in my chair, a picture of tranquility. Leo approaching. The brief, tense conversation, his body language stiff and unnatural. And then the push. The video stripped away all ambiguity. It wasn't a stumble, not a playful shove that went too far. It was a deliberate, two-handed thrust executed with a shocking economy of motion. It was an act of violence. The camera captured the cold, impassive look on his face as I disappeared beneath the water, a look that was completely absent from the tearful, Oscar-worthy performance he had given me just minutes earlier. It captured him pulling out his phone, the casual way he framed the shot as I struggled for my life. The audio picked up his laughter, tinny and distorted through the microphone, but unmistakably cruel. I paused the footage, my jaw tight. A wave of pure, unadulterated rage washed over me, so hot it felt like it would boil my blood. But just as quickly, the engineer took over again. Rage was an uncontrolled variable. I needed data. I needed the complete picture. I switched the camera angle to camera 2, the one mounted on the side of the house overlooking the patio. I fast-forwarded to the same timestamp, and that's when my heart, which had already endured so much, felt like it stopped completely. Standing near the glass doors, partially obscured by a large potted fern, was Kevin. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't talking to Nia. He was stock still, watching the dock, watching the entire event unfold. He made no move to run, no gesture to call for help. He just watched. And after Leo pushed me, I saw him give a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval before he turned away and composed his face into a mask of surprise. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with a sickening thud. This wasn't just Leo's cruel impulse. This was a coordinated attack. I saved the footage from both cameras to a secure, encrypted hard drive, creating multiple backups on separate devices. This was my primary evidence, the irrefutable truth that would dismantle their web of lies. They thought it was their word against a confused old man's. They had no idea they were up against a man who documented everything. As I sat there in the silence of my office, I glanced again at Imani's smiling face. I had failed to protect her legacy by letting these vipers into our family, but I would not fail now. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about restoring order. This was about justice. The engineer was about to go to work. My obsession with security wasn't born from paranoia, it was forged in the crucible of my career. For 45 years, I was a structural engineer. I built bridges designed to withstand 100-year floods and skyscrapers that could shrug off the force of a hurricane. In my world, you didn't hope for the best, you planned for the worst. You analyzed every stress point, every potential failure, and you built in redundancies. You trusted blueprints, not handshakes. That's why I installed the cameras. It wasn't about spying on my family, it was about maintaining the integrity of the system I had built, the sanctuary I had created for them. A system is only as strong as its weakest point, and I had a responsibility to monitor for any cracks in the foundation. My late wife, Imani, had seen the crack long before I did. She was a woman who trusted her intuition the way I trusted my mathematics, and her intuition had screamed at her about Kevin from day one. "He doesn't see a father-in-law when he looks at you, Marcus," she had told me one evening, her voice low and certain as we sat on the porch. "He sees a bank vault he's trying to find the combination to." I had dismissed her concerns, patting her hand and telling her she was being overprotective. I saw a smart, ambitious young man who made my daughter happy. I saw a financial advisor who spoke the language of growth and security. Imani saw a predator in a well-tailored suit. I had built our world with steel and concrete, but she was its true guardian, seeing the invisible threats I was blind to. Now, sitting in the silence of my office, her words echoed in my mind, not as a warning, but as a judgment on my own foolishness. I had failed her. I had failed to protect the very structure we built together, but I would not fail her memory. The digital evidence was my foundation, the concrete and steel upon which I would build my case, but I knew it wasn't enough. The video showed what they did, but it didn't show why. To truly dismantle Kevin's operation, I needed to follow the money. His home office, a place I had always considered a fortress of financial security, was now my next target. But I couldn't just walk in and demand to see my files. That would show my hand too early. I needed a reason, a Trojan horse, to get me past the gates. The plan formed in my mind with the clean, simple lines of a well-drawn blueprint. The accident at the lake was not just their crime, it was now my opportunity. I waited until the next morning, giving them a full night to believe they had gotten away with it, to let their guard down. I called Nia, making sure to put a slight wavering weakness into my voice. "Honey," I started, "I was on the phone with my insurance agent this morning about the incident yesterday." I heard her sigh on the other end of the line, a sound of pure annoyance. "Dad, can't this wait? We're a little busy." "It can't," I said firmly, then softened my tone again. "They need a list of any pre-existing conditions, doctor's visits, things like that. Apparently it affects the claim. All of my important files are in the big cabinet in Kevin's office. You know, the one he set up for me. Could I possibly stop by and get them?" There was a moment of silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, weighing the inconvenience against the potential financial payout from the insurance. Greed, as always, won. "Fine, Dad," she said, her voice clipped. "Come over around 11. Kevin will be here." The bait had been taken. Now it was time to spring the trap. When I arrived, Kevin greeted me at the door with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Marcus, good to see you on your feet. How are you feeling?" "Like I was pulled out of a lake yesterday," I said, my voice flat. I made a point of leaning heavily on the cane I had bought that morning at a drugstore. I'd never used a cane before in my life, but it was the perfect prop for the role I was playing, the frail, slightly confused old man. He led me to his office, a room filled with mahogany furniture and the smell of expensive leather. It was a stage meticulously designed to project an image of wealth and stability. My wealth, my stability. "The files are right over there in the gray cabinet," he said, pointing. "Let me know if you need any help." I sank heavily into one of the plush leather chairs opposite his desk, letting out a soft groan of effort. "Actually, Kevin," I said, looking up at him with what I hoped were weary eyes, "my throat is a bit dry. Would you mind getting me a glass of water before I start looking?" It was a simple request, a test of his arrogance. I was betting he would see it as a minor inconvenience from a feeble old man, not as a strategic move. "Of course, Marcus. Not a problem at all, Dad," he said, that perfect host persona kicking in. "Be right back." The moment I heard his footsteps fade down the hallway, the old man vanished. I moved with a speed and precision that would have shocked him. My target wasn't the filing cabinet that was just a diversion. My target was his desk. It was clean, almost sterile, but I knew that people like Kevin always had a weakness born from their own self-importance. And his weakness was arrogance. Pushed to the side of his desk, partially covered by a leather-bound planner, was a thin manila folder. It wasn't labeled with a client's name. It just had the initials K and L written in Kevin's sharp, angular handwriting. K for Kevin, and L, I was now certain, for Leo. My hands were surprisingly steady as I flipped open the folder. It wasn't full of official documents. It was his personal ledger, a playbook for his crimes. Pages of handwritten notes, stock tickers and account numbers. And then I saw them. A series of wire transfer confirmations. Large sums, tens of thousands of dollars at a time, moving from my meticulously managed retirement fund into an account for something called K&L Future Holdings. It was a systematic bleed draining my life's work into a phantom corporation. The final page wasn't a transfer. It was a loan application against my main investment portfolio. The amount requested was $500,000, the exact value of Leo's university fund. The application was still pending, awaiting final approval. Suddenly, everything became chillingly clear. My near drowning wasn't just about expediting an inheritance. It was about creating a medical crisis, a situation where I would be deemed incapacitated. A situation that would give Kevin the power of attorney he needed to forge my signature and push that loan through before I ever knew what was happening. I heard his footsteps approaching. I didn't have time to read more. I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying across the screen as I snapped clear, high-resolution photos of every single page. I closed the folder, slid it back exactly where I found it, and sank back into the chair, my heart pounding a steady, hard rhythm against my ribs, just as Kevin walked back in with my glass of water. "Here you go, Marcus," he said, smiling that empty smile. I took a slow sip, looking at him over the rim of the glass. He saw an old man, frail and defeated. He had no idea he was looking at his judge, his jury, and the man who was about to become his executioner. "Thank you, Kevin," I said, my voice perfectly even. "You're a good son." I left his house with the grace of a retreating general, my cane tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm on the pavement. I had the evidence I needed from the filing cabinet, a folder of old medical records that sold the story of my visit. But the real prize was hidden in the memory of my phone. Back in the sanctuary of my own office, I locked the door. The pretense was over. There was no need for the cane, no need for the tired act. I felt a surge of adrenaline, the same focused energy I used to feel before a major project deadline. I connected my phone to my large 4K monitor. One by one, the photos I had taken in Kevin's office filled the screen, crisp and damningly clear. Staring at the images magnified to show every detail was like looking at the blueprints of my own destruction. It was all there, laid out in Kevin's precise, arrogant handwriting, the informal ledger, the lists of account numbers, and the wire transfers. My eyes traced the flow of my money. It was a systematic bleed, draining my life's work away in steady, calculated increments. 10,000 here, 25,000 there, all moving from my retirement fund, a portfolio I had spent a lifetime building, into the abyss of a shell corporation. The name on the receiving account was K&L Future Holdings. K&L. The letters seemed to mock me from the screen. K was Kevin, obviously. But L. My mind instantly jumped to the only logical, sickening conclusion. L was for Leo, my grandson. This wasn't just Kevin's scheme. He had made my grandson, a boy of 17, his accomplice. He had poisoned him, turned him into a partner in the methodical theft of his own grandfather's legacy. He was not just stealing my money, he was stealing my family, turning them against me from the inside out. The name itself was a twisted joke. Future Holdings. They were holding my future, my security, and planning to spend it as their own. I scrolled to the final image, the one that made my breath catch in my throat. The loan application. $500,000 leveraged against my main investment portfolio. The exact amount of Leo's university fund. The fund wasn't just a number to me. It was a promise I had made to Amani. A promise that our grandson would have every opportunity we never did. And there it was, being used as collateral for their greed. The application date was from 3 days ago. It was still pending, awaiting a final signature. My signature. Suddenly the timeline snapped into focus with brutal clarity. The push at the lake wasn't a random act of cruelty. It was a catalyst. It was a desperate, ugly move to create a medical crisis. They needed me in a hospital bed, incapacitated, declared unfit to manage my own affairs. That would give Kevin the temporary power of attorney he needed to forge my signature and push that loan through before the market shifted, before his other bad investments collapsed. My near-death experience was simply a business transaction to them, a necessary step to secure their funding. I leaned back in my chair, the leather groaning under my weight. I felt a profound, chilling emptiness. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a corporate takeover of my life, planned with the cold, detached logic of a hostile bidder. They had analyzed my assets, identified my vulnerabilities, my love for them, my trust, and they had exploited them with ruthless efficiency. I now had the what from the video cameras and the why from these financial documents. The blueprint of their betrayal was complete, and I, the engineer, saw it all. I saw the flawed design, the weak materials, and the inevitable collapse, and I knew exactly which support beam to kick out first. The evidence on my phone was damning, but it was incomplete. K&L Future Holdings was a name, a ghost in the machine. To bring it into the light, I needed more than just a ledger. I needed professional help. There are times in life when you have to call on old debts, and I was about to call on one that was 30 years old. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name David Chen. We had met decades ago when he was a young, ambitious FBI agent assigned to a case of union corruption at one of my largest construction sites. I had provided him with the key evidence, the structural weakness in their organization that allowed him to bring the whole corrupt enterprise down. He had risen through the ranks since then, and though we only exchanged Christmas cards now, the bond forged in that high-pressure investigation remained. He owed me. I dialed his number. He picked up on the second ring, his voice still as sharp and alert as I remembered. "Marcus Holloway," he said, a note of genuine surprise in his voice. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Don't tell me you're finally retiring and want to go fishing." "Something like that, David," I said, my voice low and serious. "Listen, I need a favor. It has to be completely off the record. No questions asked, just a simple data pull." The warmth in his voice was immediately replaced by a professional caution. "Marcus, you know I can't just—" "Before you say no," I interrupted. "I'm calling in the chip, the big one, the one from 1993. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, weighing his options. "All right, Marcus," he finally said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "What do you need?" "A corporate entity search," I said. "A company called K&L Future Holdings. I need to know everything. Who registered it when it was founded, its listed address, any associated bank accounts. I need to know who is behind the curtain." "That's not a simple data pull, Marcus," he said, a hint of frustration in his tone. "That's a full workup." "I know what it is, David," I replied, my voice hard as steel, "and I wouldn't be asking if it wasn't a matter of life and death. My life." Another pause, longer this time. I knew I had him. The gravity of my words combined with the old debt was a combination he couldn't refuse. "Okay," he said with a sigh of resignation. "Give me the name again. I'll see what I can find. But Marcus, be careful. The kind of people who set up shell corporations usually don't like it when you start pulling on the threads." "Don't worry about me, David," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "I'm not pulling on the threads. I'm planning to cut the whole rope." 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was David. There was no preamble, no small talk. He got straight to the point, his voice a low, professional monotone. "You were right to be careful, Marcus," he began. "K&L Future Holdings is a ghost. It was registered as a limited liability company just 6 months ago. The address is a private mail drop box in Delaware. There's no office, no employees, no website. It exists only on paper." I listened silently, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. "And the money?" I asked, my own voice steady. "It's a classic wash and rinse," David explained. "Large sums were wired in from your investment accounts. From there, the money didn't sit. It was immediately funneled out into a dozen different high-risk, unregulated cryptocurrency exchanges. It's virtually untraceable now, Marcus. It's gone." "I see," I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. It wasn't about the money. It was the calculated, deliberate erasure of my life's work. "There's more," David said, his voice hesitant. "I pulled the incorporation documents. There are 2 signatories listed on the primary bank account. The first is Kevin Miller, your son-in-law." He paused. "Marcus, are you sitting down?" "Just tell me, David," I said, my voice cold. "The second signatory, the co-founder of the company, is Leo Miller, your grandson. His name and social security number are right here. It's an official document." There it was, the final brutal confirmation. It wasn't just that Leo had been an accomplice in the push at the lake. He had been a founding partner in the financial destruction of his own family from the very beginning. Kevin hadn't just corrupted him. He had incorporated him into the very fabric of his crime. The L in K&L wasn't a guess. It was a brand. A strange sense of calm washed over me. The rage and the pain were still there, but they had been forged into something harder, something sharper. This was no longer just a family betrayal. This was a conspiracy, and they had left a paper trail. David gave me a few more details, his voice full of a professional sympathy that I barely registered. I thanked him for his help and told him he had repaid his debt in full. After I hung up the phone, I sat in the silence of my office for a long time. I looked at the picture of Amani. Her smile was a beacon. She had seen the truth. Now I saw it too. They had underestimated me. They saw an old man, a relic from a bygone era. They had no idea that the principles of engineering stress leverage and controlled demolition could be applied to more than just buildings, and I was about to bring their entire corrupt structure crashing down around them. With the evidence from the cameras and the confirmation from David, I had a complete picture of Kevin and Leo's conspiracy. But there was one final, painful piece of the puzzle I needed to put in place. My daughter Naya. I had to know where she stood. Was she a willing accomplice, a manipulated victim, or simply a fool I needed to conduct one last test? I picked up the phone and dialed her number, composing my voice into that of a tired, defeated old man. She answered on the third ring, her voice clipped and impatient. "Hi, Dad, is everything okay?" "I'm not sure, honey," I said, letting a tremor of fear enter my voice. "This thing at the lake, it's shaken me more than I let on. My heart's been acting up. The doctor thinks the stress might be too much for me to live alone anymore." A beat of silence, then her voice dripping with a carefully measured concern. "Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry." "What are you saying?" He suggested I look into a place. I said, pausing as if the words were difficult to say. "A high-end assisted living facility. The best one, of course. It's expensive, but maybe it's for the best. I wouldn't be a burden on you and Kevin anymore." I let the word burden hang in the air between us. A truly loving daughter would have protested, would have insisted I live with them, would have been horrified at the thought. Nia's reaction was different. I heard a faint, almost imperceptible sigh of relief on the other end of the line. "Oh, Dad," she said, her voice suddenly lighter, infused with a new energy. "Of course you're not a burden. But we have to be realistic. Your health is the most important thing. If your doctor thinks it's the right move, then Kevin and I will support you 100%. It sounds like a wonderful solution." A wonderful solution. That's what I was to her. A problem that had just been solved. There was no sadness in her voice, no hesitation, only the quiet, unmistakable sound of relief. In that moment, the last vestiges of hope I had for her crumbled into dust. She wasn't an active conspirator, perhaps. She was something worse. She was an indifferent spectator willing to watch her own father be put out to pasture so she could get on with her life. The heartbreak was immense, a deep, crushing weight in my chest. But as I hung up the phone, that weight began to change. It cooled, it hardened, and it sharpened into a single, unbreakable point of resolve. I now knew I stood completely alone, and that meant there was nothing left to hold me back. The following day, I did not call the police. Calling the police would have been an emotional response, and this situation required cold, hard engineering. A police report would lead to a messy public criminal case, and it wouldn't guarantee the one thing I truly wanted: the complete and systematic dismantling of Kevin's financial world. For that, I needed a different kind of weapon. I needed a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a specialist, a shark who understood the intricate world of financial fraud and asset recovery. And I knew exactly who to call. Her name was Alani Washington. Her father and I had served on the same community board for years. I had watched her grow up, a fiercely intelligent girl who went on to graduate top of her class from Harvard Law. She had recently opened her own boutique firm downtown, specializing in high-stakes corporate litigation. She was young, she was hungry, and most importantly, she understood the world I came from. Her office wasn't the mahogany-paneled cliché I expected. It was modern, minimalist, with clean lines, glass walls, and a stunning view of the city skyline. It was the office of a woman who was building her own empire, not inheriting one. Alani greeted me herself, her handshake firm, her eyes sharp and perceptive. She was dressed in a tailored navy suit, the picture of professional confidence. "Marcus," she said, her voice warm but direct. "It's good to see you, though. My assistant said it was urgent. Please have a seat. What can I do for you?" I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I sat down opposite her at a large glass conference table and took a moment to arrange my evidence. I approached this meeting not as a grieving father, but as an engineer presenting a structural analysis report. "Alani," I began, my voice even and controlled, "I'm here because my family's financial structure has been compromised by a hostile actor. I have reason to believe my son-in-law Kevin Miller has been systematically embezzling my assets, and I believe my grandson has been a willing accomplice." Wow, I saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a focused professional mask. "Those are very serious allegations, Marcus," she said carefully. "Do you have any proof?" Instead of answering, I slid a tablet across the glass table towards her. Let's start with the inciting incident, I said. This is surveillance footage from my private dock taken 2 days ago. I pressed play. She watched in complete silence as the video unfolded. She saw the conversation, the deliberate push, my struggle in the water, and Leo's cold, detached reaction as he filmed me. She then watched the second angle, the one that showed Kevin observing the entire event before giving his subtle nod of approval. When the video ended, she slowly lifted her eyes from the screen to meet mine. The professional mask had slipped. For a moment, all I saw was pure, unadulterated shock. "My God, Marcus," she whispered. "He pushed you." "He did," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "That is the what. Now let's move on to the why." I took out my phone and connected it to the large monitor on her wall. One by one, I brought up the crystal-clear photos of Kevin's hidden ledger. I pointed out the wire transfers, the steady bleed of my retirement fund into the shell corporation, K&L Future Holdings. I showed her the pending loan application for $500,000 leveraged against my portfolio. I explained the timeline connecting the push at the lake directly to their desperate need for my signature. I then relayed the information my friend at the FBI had provided, confirming that K&L was a ghost corporation, that the money had been laundered through cryptocurrency, and that both Kevin and Leo were the official signatories. Alani listened intently, her pen flying across her legal pad, her mind clearly absorbing and categorizing every detail. Finally, I told her about the phone call to Nia. I recounted the conversation, the feigned concern, and the undeniable relief in her voice at the prospect of me moving into a home. She may not have pushed me, I concluded, but she was more than willing to hold the door open for those who did. When I finished, I leaned back in my chair. I had laid all the components of the case out on the table. Now it was up to the master craftsman to assemble them into a weapon. Alani was silent for a long moment, her eyes scanning her notes. When she finally looked up, the shock was gone, replaced by a look of cold, razor-sharp focus. "Marcus," she said, her voice now hard as diamonds, "they didn't just try to rob you. The premeditation in this video combined with the financial motive. A good prosecutor could argue this was attempted murder." She paused. "But you didn't come here for a prosecutor, did you? You came here for an engineer." I simply nodded. "Good," she said, a thin, dangerous smile touching her lips. "Because a criminal case is messy, it's public, and the outcome is never guaranteed. What you have here is a case for a financial execution. We have the proof of fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy. We can bypass the criminal system for now and go straight for the jugular. We will dismantle his business, freeze his assets, and leave him with nothing but the shirt on his back. We're going to conduct a controlled demolition of Kevin Miller's life." Alani leaned forward, her hands clasped on the glass table. The initial shock had been replaced by a laser-like focus, the look of a predator who has just caught the scent of its prey. "Okay, Marcus," she began, her voice crisp and devoid of sentiment. "Let's talk strategy. As I see it, we have two distinct paths forward, each with its own set of advantages and consequences. Think of it as the sledgehammer versus the scalpel." She held up one finger. "Path 1 is the sledgehammer. We take everything you've shown me, the videos, the financial documents, the information from your FBI contact, and we walk it into the district attorney's office. The case is strong. Very strong. We have conspiracy to commit fraud, felony, elder abuse, and given the video evidence of the push, a prosecutor could easily make a compelling case for attempted murder. They would be arrested. There would be a trial, a very public one. Your family's name would be all over the news." She let that sink in for a moment. "The advantage here is the potential for criminal justice. They could go to prison. There's a certain satisfaction in that, a very primal kind of victory. But," she cautioned, her eyes narrowing, "it's a messy, unpredictable process. Juries can be swayed. A clever defense attorney will paint this as a tragic family dispute, not a calculated crime. They will put you on the stand and try to portray you as a vindictive, confused old man. It could take years, and the outcome, while likely, is never guaranteed, and your daughter, she would be dragged right into the middle of it. It's a blunt instrument, Marcus. It causes a lot of collateral damage." Then she held up a second finger. "Path 2, she said, a new intensity in her voice, "is the scalpel. This is my preferred approach. This is where we control the narrative, the timeline, and the outcome. We don't go to the police. Not yet. Instead, we use the threat of criminal prosecution as our leverage. Tomorrow morning, we file an emergency ex parte motion in civil court. We present the judge with the most damning evidence of financial fraud. We'll get an immediate temporary restraining order freezing not just your accounts, but every single asset Kevin Miller controls personally and professionally. His business will be paralyzed overnight. His clients will be notified. His reputation will be destroyed before he's even had his morning coffee." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping. "Simultaneously, we file a civil lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty conversion and civil conspiracy. The burden of proof is a preponderance of the evidence much lower than beyond a reasonable doubt in criminal court. We don't have to convince a jury he tried to kill you. We just have to convince a judge he stole from you, and we have him dead to rights. We will subpoena his records, depose him under oath, and expose every dirty secret. He will have two choices: face a public trial that will not only bankrupt him but also hand-deliver a criminal conviction to the DA on a silver platter, or he can sign a settlement agreement, an agreement that I will draft." She smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. "In that agreement, he will sign back every penny he stole. He will relinquish any claim to your daughter's inheritance. He will sign a full confession of his actions, a document we will hold in escrow. He will walk away with nothing but the clothes on his back and the knowledge that we hold the power to send him to prison at any moment if he ever steps out of line. It's not about jail, Marcus. It's about complete and total annihilation. It's quiet, it's fast, and it is absolute." I listened to her lay out the two paths, my mind processing them like two different engineering schematics. The sledgehammer was appealing to the part of me that was raw with anger and betrayal. It promised a public shaming, the satisfaction of seeing them in handcuffs. But she was right. It was a messy, imprecise tool. It could shatter more than just the target. The scalpel, however, that was an engineer's solution. It was elegant, it was precise. It was a targeted strike at the very foundation of Kevin's identity, his money, his reputation, and his illusion of power. He didn't try to break my bones. He tried to liquidate my assets. It was only fitting that the response be in kind. I looked Alani in the eye. "He built his life with my money," I said, my voice cold and clear. "You will tear it down with the law. We use the scalpel." Alani didn't waste a single second. The following morning, her office moved with the silent, ruthless efficiency of a special forces team preparing for a raid. I wasn't there in person, but she kept me on a secure video call, allowing me to watch the operation unfold from the quiet of my own office. It was a masterclass in legal warfare. At precisely 9:01 a.m., the moment the civil court's electronic filing system opened, her paralegals submitted the emergency motion. It was a digital blitzkrieg. I watched the progress bar on the screen as the file loaded with scanned copies of Kevin's ledger stills from the surveillance video, and David Chen's report on the Shell Corporation was uploaded to the court's server. It was the equivalent of a precision-guided missile aimed directly at the heart of Kevin's financial empire. Simultaneously, another member of her team was drafting the notifications. These weren't friendly letters, they were digital declarations of war. Emails were sent to the compliance departments of every bank, every brokerage house, every financial institution where Kevin Miller was listed as an account holder or a signatory. Attached to each email was the freshly court-stamped temporary restraining order, a legal document that instantly froze every single dollar associated with his name, his personal accounts, his business accounts, his credit lines, even the joint account he shared with my daughter. With a series of clicks, Alani had severed his financial lifeline. As I watched this unfold, I closed my eyes and allowed myself a moment to visualize the impact. I pictured Kevin in his expensive, custom-tailored suit sitting at his mahogany desk. He'd be starting his day as he always did, with a sense of entitlement and control. He'd sip his overpriced coffee, scan the market headlines, and feel like the master of his universe. He would be completely oblivious to the fact that his universe was at that very moment ceasing to exist. I imagined him opening his email, perhaps deleting spam or flagging messages from clients. And then he would see it. An email with a subject line that would make his blood run cold. "Urgent notice of court-ordered asset freeze, case number 742-CV889. He would feel a jolt of confusion, then annoyance. He'd think it was a mistake, a phishing scam. He would click it open, his arrogance still shielding him from the coming shock. And then he would see the attached PDF. He would see the official seal of the Superior Court. He would see his name, my name, and the name K&L Future Holdings. He would scroll down and see the judge's signature on an order that effectively stripped him of all financial power. The numbers in his bank accounts would still be there, but they would be as untouchable as stars in the night sky. The coffee would turn to acid in his stomach. The smug confidence would evaporate, replaced by the cold, clammy sweat of pure panic. He wouldn't understand how it happened. He would be trapped in a state of disbelief, clicking refresh on his banking apps, watching in horror as the word "frozen" appeared next to every single account. The rage would come next to hot, impotent fury, but there would be no one to yell at, no one to blame. It would feel like an act of God. But it wasn't. It was an act of engineering. I had analyzed the structure of his life, and with Alani's help, I had just removed the primary load-bearing column, and he was just now beginning to feel the tremors. It didn't take long. Less than an hour after Alani had launched her digital assault, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Kevin's name. I let it ring 3 times, just long enough to let his panic build before answering. I took a slow sip of my coffee and pressed the speakerphone button. "What did you do?" He didn't say hello. His voice was a raw, strangled sound, a mix of sheer terror and disbelief. "What the hell did you do, Marcus?" "I'm not sure what you mean, Kevin," I said, my voice as calm and smooth as the surface of a still lake. "Don't play dumb with me," he shrieked, and I could hear the high-pitched note of hysteria creeping in. "My accounts are frozen. All of them. My business accounts. My personal accounts. Even Nia's credit cards are being declined. The bank says there's a court order. What did you do?" "It sounds like you're having a stressful morning," I replied, taking another deliberate sip of coffee. "Perhaps you should talk to your bank. I'm sure it's just a technical error." "A technical error? This is not a technical error." He was shouting now, his carefully constructed facade of control completely shattered. "This has your name all over it. I'm going to sue them. I'm going to sue you. You can't just—" "Kevin," I interrupted, and my voice was so cold it could have frozen water. "Are you admitting to any financial irregularities that might have prompted a court to take such a drastic action?" The question hung in the air, a loaded weapon pointed directly at him. He was silent. I had him. He couldn't answer without incriminating himself. The blustering rage was gone, replaced by the terrified silence of a man who had just realized the trapdoor had opened beneath his feet. Before he could find his voice, I said, "I have to go, Kevin. I have another call coming in." And I hung up. 30 seconds later, the phone rang again. This time it was Nia. Her tone wasn't one of panic. It was one of pure, entitled fury. "Dad, what is going on?" she demanded. "My card was just declined at the grocery store. Kevin is freaking out, saying you've done something to our accounts. You need to fix this right now. This is humiliating." "Humiliating?" I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. "That's an interesting choice of words." "What is that supposed to mean?" she snapped. "Just call the bank and tell them to undo whatever it is you did. Kevin takes care of all the finances. You've probably just confused them by interfering." The condescension in her voice, the complete lack of concern for me, the immediate assumption that I was the one who was confused, it was the final confirmation I needed. The heartbreak I had felt during our last call was gone, replaced by something as hard and unyielding as granite. "It's a little more complicated than that, honey," I said, my voice paternal, but with an edge of steel she had never heard from me before. "I think it's time we all had a talk, as a family." "A talk? I don't want to talk. I want you to fix this." "We will talk." I stated, my tone leaving no room for argument. "Tonight. I've made a reservation at the Capitol Grill for 7 o'clock. Your favorite place. We will sit down, have a nice dinner, and sort all of this out. Wear something nice." It was a power move, and she knew it. I was summoning them to a meeting on my terms in a public place where they couldn't scream or make a scene, and I was paying for it with the very money they could no longer access. "But our accounts," she stammered. "Don't worry about it," I said, my voice now dangerously soft. "Tonight, dinner is on me." I hung up the phone and looked out the window. The first phase of the demolition was complete. The structure was now unstable. Tonight at dinner I would kick out the final support and watch the whole corrupt edifice come crashing down. The Capitol Grill is a place built for power. It's a world of dark wood, soft leather, and hushed important conversations. The air itself feels heavy with the weight of money and influence. It was the perfect venue for an execution. I arrived 20 minutes early, not out of eagerness, but out of a need to control the environment. I chose the table myself, a secluded booth in the back corner offering a clear view of the entire restaurant, but providing a pocket of privacy. I wanted them to feel both exposed and trapped. I sat there sipping a glass of iced water, feeling a profound and unsettling calm. I was not a husband, a father, or a grandfather anymore. Those roles had been stripped from me, burned away by their betrayal. I was simply the engineer here to observe the final stress test of a structure I was about to condemn. I felt no anger, no sadness, just a quiet, unyielding sense of purpose. They arrived precisely at 7, a dysfunctional parade of guilt and anxiety. Kevin led the way, his shoulders squared in a forced display of confidence, but the slight tremor in his hand as he pushed the door open gave him away. He was a man pretending to be in control of a situation that had already consumed him. Nia followed her face, a mask of pinched, resentful anger. She wasn't sad or scared. She was furious that her comfortable life had been disrupted, that her access to my money had been so rudely revoked. Her anger was the purest form of entitlement. And then there was Leo. He trailed behind them like a ghost, a pale, hollowed-out version of the confident boy who had laughed at me from the end of the dock. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the floor, a teenager drowning in the consequences of a crime he was too immature to fully comprehend. The hostess led them to my booth. The silence was thick and suffocating. Kevin tried to break it with a weak, strained smile. "Marcus," he said, his voice a little too loud. "Thanks for inviting us." "Sit down," I said, my voice quiet but firm. It wasn't a request. It was an order. They slid into the booth opposite me, the three of them squeezed together on one side, a united front of deceit. The waiter approached a young man with a practiced smile and handed them the heavy, leather-bound menus. "Can I get you something to drink?" he asked cheerfully. They just stared at their menus as if the words were written in a foreign language. The air was electric with unspoken accusations and unanswered questions. They were waiting for me to speak, to yell, to explain, to fix it. I did none of those things. I simply picked up my own menu and began to read it with a calm, deliberate focus. I was going to let them sit in the uncomfortable silence. I was going to make them wait. The demolition had already begun, and they were about to find out they were sitting directly in the blast zone. The waiter returned his smile, unwavering, oblivious to the emotional minefield he had just walked into. "Have we decided on our drinks this evening?" he asked. Kevin, Nia, and Leo stared blankly at their menus, the words blurring into meaningless patterns. The tension was a physical presence at the table, a fourth guest that sucked all the air out of the room. Kevin cleared his throat, about to speak, but I raised my hand slightly, a small gesture that silenced him immediately. "I think we'll start with a bottle of the Stag's Leap Cabernet," I said to the waiter, my voice even and pleasant. "The 2016 vintage, please, and 3 glasses of your finest champagne for my family. I believe we have something to celebrate." The word "celebrate" landed on the table with the force of a gavel. Nia looked up from her menu, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. Kevin's jaw tightened. Even Leo flinched. The waiter simply smiled. "An excellent choice, sir. And are we ready to order our meals, or would you like a few more minutes?" "I think we're ready," I said, not looking at them for confirmation. I proceeded to order for the entire table a feast of excess. "My daughter will have the filet mignon medium rare, my son-in-law will have the dry-aged bone-in ribeye, and my grandson will have the lobster." I paused, then looked at the waiter. "And I will just have the Caesar salad." It was a calculated move. I was showering them with the very wealth they could no longer touch, all while I, the victim, ordered the simplest thing on the menu. It was a demonstration of power, a way of reminding them who still controlled the resources, who still paid the bills. They didn't protest. They just sat there trapped in a gilded cage of my making, forced to participate in this surreal final supper. The waiter collected the menus and departed, leaving us once again in a thick, heavy silence. They expected me to yell, to make accusations, to break down. But I did none of those things. My calmness was a form of psychological warfare. It was unnerving them more than any outburst could. They had prepared for a storm, but I had given them a suffocating dead calm. And as they sat there squirming in their seats, I knew they were beginning to understand. This wasn't a dinner. It was a sentencing, and the verdict had already been decided. The wine and champagne arrived. The waiter performed the ritual with practiced grace, pouring a taste of the deep red Cabernet for me to approve, then filling the champagne flutes for my family. The bubbles rose in their glasses, tiny festive explosions in the deafening silence. They didn't touch their drinks. The glasses sat on the table like untouchable museum pieces. Our food was served shortly after. The waiter placed the enormous, perfectly cooked steaks in front of Kevin and Nia and the vibrant red lobster before Leo. The aroma of rich, expensive food filled our small booth. Then he placed my simple Caesar salad in front of me. "Enjoy your meal," he said with a final cheerful smile, and then he was gone, leaving us alone with the truth. I picked up my fork and took a slow, deliberate bite of my salad. I chewed, I swallowed, and I watched them. They stared at their plates, the magnificent meal before them, an insult to the knot of terror in their stomachs. "Eat," I said, my voice quiet yet carrying the weight of a command. It would be a shame to let such fine food go to waste. Hesitantly, like condemned prisoners offered a final meal, they picked up their silverware. Kevin cut a piece of his ribeye, his movements stiff and mechanical. Nia poked at her filet mignon. Leo just stared at the lobster, its bright shell a stark contrast to his ashen face. I let them take a few bites. I let the illusion of a normal family dinner hang in the air for a few moments longer, a fragile mirage just before the storm. Then when the silence had stretched to its absolute breaking point, I set down my fork. Slowly, I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and took out my tablet. I placed it on the center of the table with a soft, definitive click. The screen came to life, casting a cold blue light on their faces. "Before we continue with dinner," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "I have something I'd like to share with the family. A little home movie." I pressed play. The first thing that filled the screen was the placid, familiar view of my dock. Then they saw me sitting in my fishing chair. They saw Leo approach. The color drained from Leo's face. He looked like he was going to be sick. He stared at the screen, his mouth half open in a silent scream. They watched the entire scene unfold. The push, my body hitting the water, my desperate struggle. Nia's hand flew to her mouth, a choked gasp escaping her lips. Her eyes darted from the screen to her son, a look of horrified disbelief dawning on her face. For the first time, she was seeing the event not through the filter of her son's lies, but with the cold, impartial eye of a camera. But my focus was on Kevin. His mask of composure didn't just crack, it shattered. His face went slack with shock, then twisted into a snarl of pure panic as he saw the footage switch angles. He watched his own ghostly image standing on the patio observing the entire event. He saw himself give that small, damning nod of approval. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with the terror of a cornered animal. The video had not just exposed him, it had convicted him. When the video ended, the tablet screen went dark. The only sounds were Nia's ragged breathing and a soft whimpering noise coming from Leo. "That was the what?" I said into the suffocating silence. I tapped the screen again. "And this is the why." The screen lit up again, but this time it wasn't a video. It was a simple, elegant flowchart that Alani's team had prepared. At the top, a box labeled Marcus Holloway's retirement portfolio. Below it, a series of arrows representing the wire transfers all flowing down into a single box at the bottom. The box was labeled K&L Future Holdings, and beneath it in bold, clear letters were the names of the two signatories, Kevin Miller and Leo Miller. If the video was a gut punch, this was the killing blow. Nia stared at the screen, her brow furrowed in confusion. The financial details were beyond her, but she understood names. She understood her husband's name next to her son's on this strange company that had apparently been receiving all of my money. Kevin just stared, completely broken. The blueprint of his crime was laid bare for all to see. There was no explanation, no excuse, no lie he could possibly spin to escape the simple, brutal truth displayed on the screen. And Leo finally broke. He buried his face in his hands and began to sob, his shoulders shaking with the full weight of his guilt and shame. The sound was raw and pathetic. I let the image burn into their retinas for a full minute. Then I turned off the tablet and slid it back into my jacket. I picked up my fork, took another bite of my salad, and looked at them, my 3 family members, my 3 betrayers. "Now," I said, my voice as cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. "Let's talk about the terms of your surrender." I leaned forward slightly, my hands resting on the table. My voice when I spoke was not raised. It was quiet, precise, and carried the cold, hard weight of irrefutable fact. Let's start with you, Kevin, I said, my eyes locking onto his. He flinched as if I had physically struck him. For 2 years you have been systematically draining my life's work. You set up a shell corporation, K&L Future Holdings, a ghost company with no purpose other than to be a black hole for my money. You siphoned off my retirement funds not in one large noticeable chunk but with a series of smaller transfers like a parasite bleeding its host dry. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought I was a foolish old man who was too busy enjoying his retirement to look at the fine print. I paused, letting the accusation settle. But you got greedy and you got desperate. Your high-risk investments, the ones you were making with my money, they weren't paying off, were they? So you planned one final big score. A $500,000 loan against my portfolio, the exact amount of Leo's university fund. But there was a problem. You needed my signature and you knew I would never approve it. So you engineered a solution. My gaze shifted to Leo, who was still hiding behind his hands. That's where you came in, Leo. Your role in this was simple yet brutal. You were to create a medical crisis. You were to push your 72-year-old grandfather, a man with a known heart condition, into a cold lake. The goal was to induce a heart attack, or at the very least to get me declared incapacitated. That would give your father the power of attorney he needed to forge my signature and secure his loan. Your inheritance was the bait, and you took it without a second thought. I looked back at Kevin. It was a sound plan from a certain psychopathic point of view, but you made a critical engineering error. You underestimated the integrity of the structure you were trying to demolish. You forgot about the cameras. You forgot that I document everything. Now I turned my attention to my daughter. Naya was staring at me, her face pale, a look of dawning horror in her eyes. "And you, Nia," I said, and for the first time a sliver of the immense pain I felt crept into my voice. "I don't believe you were an active participant in this. You didn't know about the Shell Corporation or the loan, but you are not innocent. Your crime is one of willful ignorance. You saw the expensive cars, the designer clothes, the lavish lifestyle Kevin provided, and you never once asked where the money was coming from. You chose comfort over curiosity. You chose to believe the lies because the truth would have been inconvenient." I let my words hang in the air, a final damning indictment. "When I was in the water, you blamed me for scaring your son. When your credit card was declined, you were not worried about me. You were humiliated for yourself. And when I called you yesterday broken and scared and floated the idea of moving into a home, I heard the relief in your voice. You were not losing a father. You were solving a problem. You were not a conspirator, Naya. You were the fertile ground of indifference in which this conspiracy was allowed to grow." I leaned back in my chair. The prosecution had rested. I had laid out the entire blueprint of their betrayal, from the financial fraud to the emotional rot that had allowed it to fester. They were silent, crushed under the weight of the truth. There were no more lies to tell, no more performances to give. There was only the quiet, humming silence of the restaurant and the wreckage of a family that had just been utterly and completely demolished. I let the weight of my final accusations settle over them, a crushing, unbearable silence. Then I folded my hands on the table and outlined the new reality they would be living in. "This is not a negotiation," I began, my voice leaving no room for argument. "These are the terms of my mercy. You will listen and you will comply, because my lawyer, Ms. Washington, is waiting for a single text from me. If she does not receive it by midnight, every piece of evidence you have just seen will be delivered to the district attorney's office at 9 a.m. tomorrow." I looked directly at Kevin. "For you, Kevin, the terms are simple. You will sign a full confession admitting to the embezzlement and the conspiracy. You will sign over any and all assets you have, which will be liquidated to begin repaying what you stole. You will sign divorce papers and you will walk away from my daughter's life with nothing. You will disappear. If I ever see or hear from you again, the confession goes public." Next I turned to Nia. "Nia, you will not be left destitute, but you will also not be rewarded. Your inheritance will be placed into a strict trust managed by my lawyers. You will receive a modest monthly allowance, enough to live on, but not enough for the lifestyle you are accustomed to. Access to the principal will be contingent upon you completing 1 full year of mandatory psychological therapy to address your choices." Finally, I looked at Leo. He was still crying, but he looked up at me, his face a mess of tears and shame. "Leo," I said, and my voice was devoid of all grandfatherly warmth. There is no $500,000 university fund. It's gone. Your father spent it. Your future from this moment on is your own responsibility. You will get a job. You will apply for student loans. You will learn the value of earning something for yourself. That is your punishment, and it is also your only chance at redemption. I stood up from the table, my napkin placed neatly beside my unfinished salad. I looked down at the three of them, their faces a portrait of utter devastation. Their expensive meal sat untouched, a feast for ghosts. My lawyer is expecting your signed agreements at her office tomorrow by noon, I said. I pulled a crisp $100 bill from my wallet and placed it on the table. That should cover the meal, I said. The rest is a debt you will spend the rest of your lives repaying. And with that, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them alone in the wreckage. I didn't look back. It's been 6 months since that dinner. I sold the large family house, the one filled with the ghosts of a life that was a lie. I also sold the lake house, the scene of the crime. The properties fetched a handsome price. I didn't need the space or the memories. I moved into a penthouse apartment downtown, a place of glass and steel and breathtaking views of the city. It's smaller, cleaner, more efficient. It's a space that looks forward, not back. The bulk of the money, including every cent Alani managed to claw back from Kevin's disastrous investments, went into a new foundation. I called it the Amani Holloway Scholarship Fund, a legacy for the woman whose wisdom I had ignored for too long. It was designed to provide full scholarships for gifted, underprivileged African-American students pursuing degrees in engineering and architecture. I had spent a lifetime building structures out of concrete and steel. Now I would spend the rest of my days building futures. Last month we held the first award ceremony in a small rented hall. There were 5 recipients, 5 bright, hungry, brilliant young minds who had overcome incredible odds. I listened to their stories of resilience and determination that put my family's petty greed to shame. A young woman from the South Side who taught herself calculus by watching videos on a library computer. A young man who had worked 2 jobs all through high school to support his sick mother. As I stood on the stage and shook their hands, I felt a kind of joy I hadn't felt in 30 years. It wasn't the dull satisfaction of providing for those who felt entitled. It was the sharp, brilliant joy of providing an opportunity for those who had truly earned it. This was my new family. This was my real legacy. It was a foundation built not on blood, but on merit, on shared dreams, and on a mutual desire to build a better world. I was no longer a vault to be emptied. I was a cornerstone for something new, something that would last. I don't ask about them, but news travels. From what Alani has told me, Kevin honored the agreement. He signed the confession, the divorce papers, and then he simply vanished. He is a ghost now, erased by his own greed. Nia lives in a small rented apartment on the other side of town. She lives on the allowance from the trust, a modest sum that I'm told she struggles with. She is learning, I hope, the difference between what one wants and what one needs. And Leo, I heard he didn't go back to his private school. He's working at a warehouse loading trucks, saving money for community college. I feel no satisfaction in their downfall. Only a quiet, profound sense of finality. The structure failed, and I simply cleared away the rubble. Looking out from my new apartment, watching the endless flow of traffic on the city streets below, I've had a lot of time to reflect. I see now that my greatest engineering failure wasn't in a bridge or a building. It was in my own family. I had given them a foundation of money, but I had neglected to build it with the steel of character, integrity, and gratitude. I had made them comfortable, but I had not made them strong. They saw my love not as a gift, but as a resource to be endlessly exploited. For years, I believed that providing for my family meant giving them everything they wanted. I built an empire for them only to find they saw me not as a father, but as a vault to be cracked open. The cold water of that lake was a harsh baptism. It taught me that true wealth isn't what you leave behind in a will, but the strength and integrity you inspire in others. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't to provide a safety net, but to remove it and force them to learn how to fly on their own. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. I am truly interested to know what you think. What would you have done in my situation? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And finally, let me know how far my story has traveled by telling me where you are listening from. Thank you for your support.